at making a directory, which we've already done to some degree. I'm going to stick around on the MacBook Pro here today for this one last week. Starting on week 4, I'm going to provide instructions on server access, and we're going to start working more as a community now that we're going to know the basic functions and ways of moving around. We're going to get into file sharing with each other and what have you, so it's really exciting. It looks like we are going to have a server to play with for this class. We discussed making a directory. Let me see where we are right now. We created the directory week 1 already. We talked about using the different types of escape characters or the single ticks to get into directories and files containing spaces. So now we're in week 1. Under week 1, let's create 2 directories under here. I don't believe there's anything here. There's not. So the true way to do that would be an ls-a, where we'd have the parent and the child directory, or the parent and the current directory. That's the period, and the ... would be the parent directory. So we know by seeing that everything is completely empty here. So, and I don't know if you can see this on my screen, but that's the period there, and that's the double period there. So let's go ahead and create 2 directories. Let's create temp and temp1. So mkdir is the make directory command. The relative path would be right here under week 1 where we are, so we could just type in temp1. Let's make a directory now using a relative path, or I'm sorry, an absolute path. mkdir, we're going to start from the root. We know that it's under users here. On Ubuntu, it's going to be /home, lowercase home, and then your user account. So make sure you type pwd to know your starting point. So /users, and then under this I've got week 1, and here I'm going to create temp2 like this. So that's another way we can go ahead and do that. Now if I do an ls, I can see I've got 2 different directories, temp1 and temp2. I can't actually tell that they're directories, but I know they are, and I know that all directories are files. So now I'm going to show you a really important parameter with make directory, and that is the parameter to create parent folders if they don't already exist. So when we go ahead and do that, if we type mkdir, and let's use a relative path, we'll do temp2, and under this we'll create directory test1, and under that we're going to have call it data1. Okay, so now when we go ahead and do this, we know that test does not exist yet, and if we hit enter here, this is an error right here. This is standard error. We're going to discuss standard error later, but I want to introduce you to the term. So this is standard error. This did not work. If I were to go ahead and list temp2, it didn't create anything. However, if we do the same command and we use a parameter or an option of -p, that will tell us to go ahead and create any parent directory that doesn't already exist. So if I go ahead and do this now, I did not get an error. If I do an ls under temp2, you can see I have a test directory, which I created here. It created it there. If I do an ls on test, whoops, I'm in the wrong, look at that, didn't do it right. If I'll do a cd to temp2, now I can go to test, now I can see that I have data 1 there. So it went and created any directory that I didn't already have. So that's an important concept, an important point to understand. We could have done this mkdir-p with a relative path or an absolute path. That's also important to recognize and understand here. So we also have the -v flag, which will explain this with some verbosity. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to use an absolute path. I'm going to do a P and I'm going to do a V this time, and we're going to see some detail about what we're actually creating rather than getting no output at all. We do an mkdir. We want it to work, so we'll do the -p. This time we're going to use temp1 so we can see the directories getting created. We'll create a test directory under there, and we'll also create a data directory under this one. So previously we did it under temp2, now we're doing it under temp1. That's how we did have it set up. So let's add the V here for verbose, and just for kicks, let's put the users slash let's do it like this just to mix it up a little bit, just so we can see how it works. And we will go ahead and do all this. And I have a permission denied there for some reason. Why is that? I probably have a typo. Let's go ahead and figure that out, shall we? I see what it is. I do have a typo. I used my Albertus ID instead of my full name right here. So now we go ahead and do that, and it should go ahead and create it and give us some verbosity in case there was a problem. Apparently, the verbose flag isn't accepted in this version of Mac OS X. However, this should work if you're doing it with Ubuntu. That said, if I do an ls-l and I look at users, oops, sorry about that, users, Glenn Sheneman, I look at week 1, temp 1, test, and you should see that I have the data directory that was just created right there. Very good now. So let's discuss remove directory, shall we? So we have the data1 directory right there. We do a pwd for the present working directory. We can see exactly where we are. So if we were to simply type rmdir and then data1, it's going to delete it for us. So if we were to, let's go ahead and recreate it real quick. We'll just do it in the relative path, less typing. So we'll go ahead and recreate this real quick. And now we're going to talk about the touch command, where we can use the file and we can just simply recreate it there. So let's go ahead and put a blank file under data1. So let's do a touch. We'll put it under data1 and we'll call it foo.bar. And we hit enter. There's no output. We can assume it works. If we do a list on data1, we can see that there is the file foo.bar there. So now let's remove that file, that directory here. So let's do an rmdir data1. Uh-oh, we can't do that. It gives us an error. It says the directory has to be empty. That's something there, isn't it? So let's discuss how we would remove a file. So there are a couple of flags that we can use with rmdir, with remove, to get rid of the directory. So let's get back to that in a minute though. For now, let's know that we can't remove a directory if it's not empty. So something there to consider. However, let's go back one. Go back one more. So let's take a look at temp 1, because there is no files there. There is no files there, so let's go back a couple of layers. And now let's do an rm dir, and we will do a -p on this one, and we'll try and do that against test. Can't let us do that either because it's not empty. We're going to, like I said, there is a workaround for this. We're going to go into that later. It's actually with the rm command. So we will go ahead and discuss that later, but for now, let's know that these directories can't have anything in them, or they won't be able to be cleared. Now, let's see where we are. We're in temp 1, ls-ltr. So now let's take a file here. Let's go ahead and touch. We'll call it file 1, just to create an empty file. So now you've got the directory test, and you've got file 1 right here. And we'll do a pwd just to see where we are. If we were to do a cp command, we could copy file 1 to file 2, let's say. So let's do file 1, relative path, to file 2. And now we've got file 1 copied to file 2. Let's now get a little bit fancier with our relative paths. Let's do a cp to copy. Let's copy file 2. And let's go back one level. So now we go back to the parent, which is week 1. I believe it is. Is that right? Yes, it is. Week. And we will put the file here under file 3. So now we're going back to week 1, and then we're putting it under file 3. And that didn't work for some reason. What am I doing wrong? Is it CP? There is no file 2. There is a file 2. So let's see why that didn't work, shall we? So cp file 2 / temp. I was off one level. Temp 1. Now I can go ahead and put it somewhere. See what I did? I just missed one simple level there. So it's important to know where you are and where you're going with this. So now let's go ahead and put file 3 right there. So now under week 1, we've got file 3. Now if I do an ls ... I can see week 1 right there. ls ... And now I can see file 3 is sitting right there. So a lot of really interesting ways to copy. Copying with an absolute path will work every time, and you won't have to worry about this sort of confusion like I just had right here, because we're going from the very start of the directory. So users, we go here, we'll go to week 1, we will go and copy. I'm sorry, I meant to type CP, not CD, excuse me. So here we'll go under week 1, and we'll put something under temp 1, copy from temp 1, we'll copy file 1, and we'll go to users. Now we're going to specify temp2, and we're going to copy file, name file 4, let's say. So here it takes us a lot more to type this all in. I'll sit here for a second so you can absorb this. It takes us a lot longer to key this in with an absolute path, but it's guaranteed that this is going to copy and this is going to work, and you'll see it all. And of course, there is no issue. So there's advantages to both. We are going to get into copying more than one file now, and we're going to get into doing recursive copies a little bit later as well. But for now, that's quite a bit to go ahead and look at. The only other thing I wanted to cover quickly is the moving of a file. So let's talk about that right now. These directories are getting a little cluttered. So let's go back under week 1 here. Actually, look at that. Didn't put a space after the parameter. You can get away with that in Windows, but not here. So here we have a few more files under week 1. So let's talk about moving a file. So let's say we've got file 3 right here. It's MV for move. So we're going to move file 3. We will put it under temp1. And that is a way we can go ahead and do that using relative paths. So if I type that right there, now I do another ls, you can see that file 3 is gone. If I do an ls on temp1, an ls on temp1, we can see that file 3 has now been put under there. So that's all fine and good. And we're going to move on from there and discuss renaming files and what have you. So if we can go ahead, we'll take that file there, name temp1, and we will rename it to, say, file 4. So when we rename a file in Linux, we rename it as mv file 1. We will change it to file 4. So mv file 1 to file 4, we're renaming it by moving it to a different name. As you can see right there, that worked. Now let's talk about removing files, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Thank you. So now let's go ahead and discuss removing a file here. So let's see what's in this directory. Let's go back to week 1. And let's go under temp1. Here we have a few files. Let's go ahead and create a directory. We'll call it test1. We'll go into test1. We'll create file 1. We'll create file 2. Oops, touch file 2. And we will go back. So now we have a directory. And if we go into that directory, we have 2 files in there. So now, as you know, if we try to do an rmdir to remove directory on test1, it's going to give us a message saying that your directory is not empty. So we can do an rm for remove to remove files. And remember, everything in Linux is a file. So if we were to do an rm on test1 like this, it's going to say it's a directory and not a file. However, if we do an rm-r, that stands for recursive, which means it'll dig into the directory structure and get rid of it. So an rm-r will work in this case by itself. An rm-rf is more commonly used, which means remove with force. So here we can go ahead and we can type in our test here. And as you can see, it takes care of the entire directory. We do an rm on file 2, let's say. It will go ahead and get rid of it. If you had a list of files, it could prompt you. One thing I like to do if I'm not sure and I want to know what I'm doing is I'll do a -i. That stands for interactive. So now if I type rm-i file 2, it's gonna, whoops, I don't have a file 2, file 3. It's gonna say, do you really want to remove file 3? And I'm just gonna say yes. So now there's only file 4 left. So that's how removing files and directories work. There is, like I said, a little bit of trick to it. It's going to be the -r will make it recursive. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And thank you very much. That was the end of the week.